Welcome to SAM Conversations. In this episode, we are looking at gender security and a very fundamental question whether justice is being done in India when we look at the wide spectrum of violence against women, of which rape is perhaps the most visible and the most deplorable. Any crime is deplorable, but of late, India has gone through some very shameful episodes. Some are better known as Nirbhaya, where we had a case of a young lady being gang raped in Delhi. This happened in December 2012. That is a case that had come up for conviction after 7 years. There was yet another case called the Unnao rape case, which involved a former BJP MLA. The party had expelled him. That's a different matter. And that's another case that had caused national outrage. And more recently, we had yet another, both tragic and ghastly case of a young lady doctor, a veterinary doctor in Hyderabad, who was similarly waylaid, gang raped, killed. And in this case, the local police carried out an action that is being called an encounter, which is an odd word to use in this case. But the suspects were killed, they were neutralized. This is another case which attracted national attention, so much so that the Chief Justice of India cautioned against instant justice. So against this frame of reference, we would be looking at both gender security, women's security, the girl child, and is justice being done? To discuss this, I have two very qualified ladies on the panel. We have Nilova Chaudhury, a very senior journalist, a member of the Society for Policy Studies, editor of our journal, the IR&A. And we also have Nirupama Sekhri, media professional and who's also spent a lot of time in civil society and issues that are related to what you might call as of public policy, particularly in relation to education, health and children. Let me start with you, Nilova. All these cases that we have seen, whether it's Nirbhaya, Unnao, and the level of violence that Indian women and the girl child have to go through, what is your own assessment? It's a very bleak subject. I'm sorry for asking you such a question.
It's essentially a takeoff of the entire patriarchal system that has persisted in this country for millennia. The basic problem is the need for assertion of power over the woman, who forms half of the population. As things have improved and there is greater equality, I won't say that equality, I won't use the term equality, but the point is that as things have evolved and women have increasingly perforce or otherwise had to go out into the public sphere, there is a sense of inadequacy in their contemporary males, I think.
So isn't this a global phenomenon? Why I'm saying this is that we saw the Me Too movement in the United States and people,
yes,
this whole exercise of power over women.
To a certain extent, but not to the extent that it has been in India, I think, because the levels of repression have been a lot more. So for an average male in India to see women going outdoors, being independent, somehow is like a slur on their manhood. And if a woman resists, it becomes that much worse. Now, we're talking about cases like Nirbhaya, for example. Jyoti Singh, we will mention her name because her mother did. Now, she was killed and brutalized in this absolutely barbaric way. There's no other way to say it. 7 years down the line, we still have mercy petitions being heard and put up one by one in a specious way to delay justice. Now, till such time as the justice delivery system gets somewhere where it might put the fear of, the law in potential criminals,
you don't see any
I don't see any way that things are going to move.
Can I just transfer that thought to you, Nirupama? When Nilova says that will justice ever be done, given the Indian context, I can't help recalling that there was a former Chief Justice of India who said that we have almost 33 million cases that are pending across all Indian courts, and that to expect that this backlog would be cleared would take some absolutely absurd kind of over 100 years if we look at the existing bench strength as far as the Indian judiciary is concerned. So against such a backdrop, my question to you really is that will justice be done? If so, what constitutes justice in such a case?
First of all, I think there's a problem when we keep saying justice be done, because it seems to be it's become a kind of a war cry for vendetta and vengeance. So I think justice being done is not being seen as something, I don't think we can discuss it objectively, because it's already been completely appropriated by this vengeful cry for, whether it's somebody saying in the parliament that they should be hanged in public, or so I think
we had a member of parliament, Ms. Jaya Bachchan,
so which is very unfortunate. I think we have to step back a little bit and see. I find these three big groups very, very interesting, and they don't seem to be working together. So one is, let's say, justice. I think you have laws in India which are actually completely askew towards women. You look at the dowry law. You look at, if I go to the police station today and say I have a rape complaint, actually the law works for me way more than it would work in most civilized nations. So you have on one hand these laws being passed which are supposedly helping women. On the other hand, you have the implementation agencies that drag their feet to either, whether it's to lodge the complaint or whether it is to give justice.
So this is the police and the local.
The police and the local, and then and the parliament as well to some extent. If you look at the Unnao rape case, and then on the other hand, you have the civil society. Now, I think we should not even call it civil society, because I think it's an extremely uncivil society. Because the way the three of them work, it seems to be a Bollywoodization of the entire justice system. So even rape, when we say, I find it, especially in a place like India, we have to be careful about using the word rape because of the patriarchal system. I think you have even the men who think it's their honor that has been slurred, rather than looking at it as a crime. I think it is too colored by this entire, whether it's patriarchal, whether it's the men standing for the women or it's the women standing for the men. I think that we need to put rape or any assault on women firmly more on in a crime area, so that we can look at things and actually not just have justice done as in a person has raped and now let's hang him, but to look at how we can change the system where women are safe, because whether these people are hanged or not, it hasn't stopped.
Fair enough. Sorry, I'm butting in here. The point is well taken, but the fact of the matter is that there is no fear of the law. You see, and the point of justice being done is not to hang and quarter these people, but that they must know that at the end of a particular time frame, if they have committed a particular heinous crime, and let's put it as crime. I have no issues about this being called a crime, but at least that crime has got to have some species of punishment, be it 7 years in jail, be it whatever, be it, the death penalty for certain cases when it turns into murder, whatever that might be. Remember that little girl in Kathua as well. We're forgetting about her in this entire talk of, these specific high-profile rapes. That was against, that was meant to be sending out a lesson to the entire community that we will not tolerate your trying to encroach upon our areas. So the basic point at issue is that until and unless you have crime being given a resolution, or at least those who commit a crime have got to face the consequences.
They should be deterred.
They have to be deterred.
But Nilova, in as much as I'm just trying to make this point that what you are outlining is the desirable end. Meaning that the perpetrator should be aware that there would be the force of law, and therefore we hope it will act as a deterrent. But my own sort of observation, again, and more as an analyst working in security issues, this impacts internal security. So if you look at a country like India, we are talking about a large demography, 120 crores and plus. So purely statistically, you might say we are talking about half of that demography is women or girl children. And it is the responsibility of the state to ensure security for the vulnerable, the weak, women, girls. This goes back to Chanakya and the Arthashastra. What is happening now in India is a complete distortion. And why I'm drawing attention to the state and the guardians of the state is that there was a study by the National Crime Bureau and the Association for Democratic Reform had extrapolated some figures. They did a survey of 4,000 MLAs, state assemblies, and they did a survey of members of parliament, both upper house, lower house. And they came up with a very, I would say, shameful number. 76 sitting members of legislative assemblies, both MLAs and MPs, Lok Sabha and center and states. 76 of them have been charged with crime, rape. And these are cases which are still hanging, in this great 33 million cases. So against such a backdrop, I'm saying, what can be the contour of justice? And we are looking for ways ahead. And you talked about we have to change the whole system.
Yeah, but I think
if your parliament itself is guilty, will anything happen in a democracy?
I think that's the important point, and that's why when I'm saying that just hanging somebody or how quickly this justice is done, I think the problem we have to look at is that the criminals are not outside the society. I think the problem in India today is there is a criminalization of society. It's not just of the parliament. So it's not that you have
we had our own Me Too.
You had,
I'm sorry to say this, media people of high profile have been indicted.
No, or Jyoti Singh. After she was raped, she was lying on the road there and nobody helped her. Now, so it is not, and I think that is just as much a crime. So I think the problem is that we have to, so what you were saying about, people deterring, I don't think a justice system deters regular people. If the entire society is steeped and immersed in crime, you cannot, then that means everybody is a criminal. I think the point I'm trying to make is that, in accidents, I worked in road safety for a while. And there was this gentleman who said something very interesting. And he said, the problem in India is that anywhere else we work, you have 80% of people who follow the law, and then you have 20% of the people who don't follow the law. So we go after those 20%. He said in India, the problem is 80% don't follow the law. So he says you can't go, there is no way an enforcement agency can work. So I think that's partly a problem with this, this safety, this women's safety in India as well, is that you don't have that one or two people you can say, वो सब यहाँ सीटी बजाते हैं, सब यहाँ कुछ ना कुछ बोलते रहते हैं. So I think what we have to look at, film करते हैं. So I think we have to come forward to tell. So these people as well. I mean, and I'm sorry, I know in this environment to say, but I think that poor child, and he was a child when he committed this crime. We are unable to, again I'm saying about the Bollywoodization, that Insaf Ka Tarazu which we saw when we were kids, which were not allowed, it seems to be a common thing. I mean, Insaf Ka Tarazu was an adult film.
Child of 5-6 can download all kinds of things on the phone.
Yeah,
I think. But what's the way ahead, Nilova? Meaning that we know the problem.
Yeah.
What is the way ahead for a country like India?
I think one of the things that has to be done is a proper classification, as Nirupama said. Remember a time when there were these things called dowry deaths that used to happen with alarming frequency? Now, why should that dowry death be anything different to a murder? It was plain and simple murder, right? So murder has a set of laws that have to, that can be dealt with, that deal with murder and mete out a certain amount of punishment. Similarly, this rape kind of, sort of taking rape out as this unique kind of phenomenon and trying to glorify it and try to, glorify the person who has been raped, as it were, is not quite the right way. You need to have a, direct crime and punishment. It shouldn't be a glorification of either the person or the crime. It should be a direct crime and punishment.
Again, if I could just say another perspective is I don't think it's glorified. What happens really is that because of the nature of the beast as far as the media is concerned, whenever there is such an incident, we know Nirbhaya what happened. We know what happened with the Unnao case. We know Hyderabad, if you remember. The Indian news cycles for about 12 to 18 hours were covering the most ghastly detail of what happened to that poor young lady from Hyderabad. But This is a very serious, I would say, problem, not just for India, but perhaps even globally. Now, there is no satisfaction in saying this, that while India has these figures, we spoke about the total number of rapes, one study said that on a daily basis, there are 93 rape cases reported in India. This is from the National Crime Bureau. Now, there are other people who point out that despite this, India is not up there, that in terms of the global listing, it's a sad kind of litany of states to count or countries to count. South Africa apparently is right on top, according to one estimate in terms of the highest incidence of rapes for a given demography. And paradoxically, a country like Sweden also comes up in the first 10 apparently, according to this particular study. So I think we are looking, as you said, Nirupama, and you, Nilova, that today's market forces, today's socio-technological kind of environment have led to a situation where I think, the availability of this kind of sexual deprivation, sexual transgressions is being, our younger generation is being exposed across the board. Mm-hmm. Today we say that you may not be as literate in India, but you know how to use a phone, then you can download. This is a very serious issue, I think, not just for India, but for all of South Asia.
But I'd just like to say one thing about, what Nilova just said about glorification. I think that's a really, really valid point. Because again, it is about, what you said about exposure. This is the kind of thing now people have gotten used to. And they, in fact, it's a very sick way of saying it, they almost crave. You don't have people talking about male rape, and it happens. And it can be as brutal, but it's something that we would not be comfortable with because it would open up a can of worms. We're not comfortable with homosexuality. We're not comfortable with, the idea of a male because it's supposed to be a macho person, committing the same kind of crime on another male. So I think that there is a real need for, like Nilova said, of trying to put this more into the crime area and less into this, this honor and we must look after our women kind of a thing, because then yes, we would.
So we are really talking about some kind of a very deep societal change, but this really, I think, is the tip of a very, very murky and very deplorable kind of iceberg. And we can only hope that, as we go ahead into the next year, that these issues would get the kind of attention that they deserve. So on that note, allow me to thank you, Nirupama and Nilova. Thank you for watching. We'll come back with another episode of SAM Conversations. Thank you.